know that this morning is all about lending your ear to all of the wonderful things that the Distress Center does. Thank you so much for being here this morning and helping support us. We're going to be outlining some of the amazing things, the critical things that the Distress Center does here in Calgary that are so vital for our community and beyond. Now, to begin things today, we first want to just start with a land acknowledgement.
What is land acknowledgement?
Those of us that are continuing our oral history are blessed. What we shared, that was told from way back.
We were part of the ecosystem. We were not masters of it.
You know, after we grow up from our biological mothers, the earth becomes our caregiver. Everything that we need is there.
We were raised to believe that everything has a spirit, and that everything around us is alive and has a purpose.
The spirit of the land and our spirit. You can't separate land and people.
In Treaty 7 territory, I'm accepted, I'm something, and I'm with my people.
We honor our ancestors by acknowledging Treaty 7 territory. We acknowledge the Treaty 7 nations, the Piikani First Nation, the Siksika First Nation, the Kainai First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. We acknowledge the ancestral territory of the Siksikaitsitapi, the Blackfoot Confederacy, and the home of Métis Region number 3.
I see many of us have got that chat box working there. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for chiming in. Thanks for saying hi. And we are going to now begin the program. And to start things off, please welcome to the virtual stage Duncan Melville, the board chair for the Distress Center. Good morning, Duncan.
Thank you, Lauren. I'll keep this quick, but just on behalf of the board, the staff, and the hundreds of volunteers at Distress Center, I'd like to welcome you all to our 12th annual Lend an Ear event. As we deal with the fallout of COVID and the dynamic economic situation we find ourselves in, the discussion of mental health continues to be front of mind, which is why our volunteers and staff remain incredibly busy today, providing 24/7 mental health and crisis support. This morning, we're honored to have an all-star lineup of 4 individuals join us for a discussion on embracing mental wellness. They'll each bring their own perspective on what it took to personally succeed under pressure, what resources were needed to get through moments of adversity, and when they needed to reach out for support. So I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Catriona, Karen, Ron, and Stephanie for sharing their time and experiences this morning. I am really looking forward to the discussion. Finally, I'd also just like to thank you all for attending. All funds raised through your ticket purchases and donations go towards our crisis services to support the volunteers and staff who save lives every day. So thank you and enjoy the event.
Thank you so much, Duncan. Of course, we know the support from sponsors is absolutely huge and critical in raising funding for the Distress Center. We are going to bring in one of the superstars from behind the scenes, one of the Distress Center volunteers, to share more. I'm going to turn things over to Ian McDonald.
My name's Ian McLeod, and I'm here at the Distress Center call center right now. I've been a firefighter for 20 years, almost, full-time, part-time, all the time. So to say that I'm very passionate about everything that the job entails would be saying very little. Unfortunately, over that period of time, I've encountered a number of very stressful situations that have left people on the periphery of the incident very shaken up. Unfortunately, we don't get a lot of training to deal with that type of problem, so I turned to the Distress Center to see if I couldn't find ways to build up some confidence and some experience in helping people in emotional crisis. I learned that there was no better place for me to get the training and experience I needed than with the Distress Center. So I applied in September of last year, started training, and I've been on the line since December. This helped me provide the support that was needed not only by the public, but also my family, friends, and coworkers. The time that I've spent on the line since then has helped provide me with the experience and the confidence that I needed to recognize people who were in emotional crisis and to step in and give them the support that they needed that my firefighter training wasn't able to provide. All of Distress Center's services are free, making Lend an Ear an important event that raises much needed funds for our mental health and crisis services. I'd like to thank the Viewpoint Foundation, Altitude Communications, Land Solutions, GLJ, Daytona Homes, Event Fluent, and of course Global Calgary and 77 CHQR. My name's Ian MacLeod, and I sure hope you enjoy Lend an Ear.
And how great to hear from Ian MacLean about all of his experiences and all of his next steps. Again, so vital with everything that we are seeing and dealing with right now. I've been able to get behind the scenes and see some of that amazing work that those volunteers do, and of course the support of sponsors is just incredibly vital as well. We are going to turn things over to our main event now and introduce this star-studded panel that we've alluded to and really get the conversation going. We're going to be talking about a lot of questions. How do you deal with pressure? Do you create stress buffers? Do you reach out for help? And how do we really change the narrative on mental health? You're about to find out about that and so much more from the amazing individuals on our panel who are going to be sharing their personal experiences and answering some of those questions, and again, much more. First to the stage this morning is our moderator for the conversation today, an incredibly familiar face for so many of us, welcoming him into our home throughout the many, many years, award-winning sports broadcaster, sports legend, Ron MacLean. Thanks for being here, Ron. And Ron, of course, brings more than 30 years of award-winning experience to his roles as host of Hockey Night in Canada and co-host of Rogers Hometown Hockey. He knows Olympic sport well, has been a passionate advocate for Olympians, and he's going to be leading our panel discussion this morning on the mental health challenges that some of the best athletes face during their career. So welcome, Ron. Our next panelist we're bringing to the virtual stage is Dr. Karen MacNeill. Dr. MacNeill is a performance psychologist, speaker, and consultant with more than 2 decades of experience working with Olympians, Fortune 500 business leaders, and organizations. And whether she is mentally preparing those Olympians for those gold medal performances, helping executives leverage their strength, she believes that cultivating the freedom to perform by developing mental fitness and bolstering resilience is integral to achieve high levels of personal performance and excellence. So I want to welcome to the stage, Karen.
Nice to be here.
Our next panelist, gold medalist, Stephanie Labbé. Stephanie, of course, helped lead Canada to back-to-back Olympic medals, including saving the final 2 penalty shots to secure Canada's historic gold in Tokyo in 2020, the Olympic final. Steph was not only a leader and an influential part of the Canadian women's soccer team, she's also been an incredibly important voice for the LGBTQ plus community, as well as a strong advocate for mental health awareness. She's also committed to bringing professional soccer to Canada. So I want to welcome Stephanie.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good morning. And our final panelist joining the stage today, Canadian speed skater Catriona Le May Doan. 2-time Olympic gold medalist, world time champion in speed skating, Catriona Le May Doan was known as the fastest woman on ice. She is the only woman only woman, folks, to set 8 consecutive world records in one distance. A CBC commentator, author, motivational speaker, recipient of the Order of Canada, chef de mission for the 2022 Olympic Games, and a mother of 2, Catriona is presently President and CEO of Sport Calgary. So welcome to the conversation, Catriona. Thank you all so much for sharing this morning with us. And I'm going to turn things over to Ron now.
And Lauren, thank you. I'm going to get you to stick around just for one brief story. First of all, beautiful things off the get-go there from Ian and Duncan and the land acknowledgement. I'm on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit here in Oakville, Ontario. And the chief of the Mississaugas is Stacey Laforme, who is a poet. He's an incredible writer, and he's a guide in my life. When I've gone through some difficult times, back when I was young and had anxiety, crazy panic attacks, I didn't know to call anyone. I didn't know to reach out. I thought I was the only one suffering. But later in my career, as an example, when Don Cherry left Hockey Night in Canada, it was a hugely contentious issue. I had police protection. It was crazy times. And I turned to Stacey Laforme to help guide me through how I would sort of craft what I'd say on Hockey Night in Canada. So the First Nations have been incredible guides. Richard Wagamis, who's the late Richard Wagamis now, another good example. So, Lauren, for you, because Diane Jones-Konahowski is obviously the 6 degrees of connection for all of us as an idol to all of us in her sporting career and in her administrative career. Diane was chef de mission for the Australia Olympics. Lauren got her start in Melbourne, Australia. She was going to school there and got into broadcasting in Australia and came back to Canada for the 2010 Vancouver Olympics, her home. But I remember Diane being at the opening ceremony in 2000 at Sydney, Australia, talking to Steve Nash, the great basketball player who was incredible for Canada in those games. And I remember Kathy Freeman lighting the cauldron and all the pressure that she had to endure. And it was just a very special Olympics. And Brian Williams was doing the opening show. And my task was to explain what I would be doing on the coverage. And I was doing the morning shows. And so I was stationed at the Sydney Harbour Bridge for my portion of the opening ceremony. And I thought it would be fun to get a Crocodile Dundee hat to wear as part of my opening on camera. So I went to a little store in Sydney and I checked out all the hats and I put one on that I thought was just perfect. And the woman who was working there says, "Is it the rat's ass?" And I thought, rat's ass, that's kind of a funny expression. In Canada, we might say, "Is it the cat's meow?" I'm not sure what we would say, but not rat's ass. Anyway, as it turns out, it was her Australian accent. She was saying, "Is it the right size?" Not rat's ass. And of course, I finally figured that out and I went with it on CBC and everything else is great. And I thought that would be a nice way to start. Lauren, thank you for emceeing. I'll bring you back, of course, at the end of our little conversation. But this idea of the right size, I think, is going to be a thread for Stephanie, Catriona, and Karen. There is no one size fits all headspace. And as confusing as language can be, when we lend an ear, Lord knows how many times I've tried humor or irony or sarcasm in my broadcasting career, only to find out I'm hurting one of the viewers with what I think is wit. So communication, curiosity, that'll be a big thing, but also that idea, Dr. MacNeill, of one size. There is no one size fits all approach. So why don't you welcome us? Why is it important for you to be here, and why are we here today?
Yes, thanks, Ron. And I think really, why I am here really starts with my own personal journey of what I do today. And I think all of us, it came from an Olympic moment. And it was really, I've always had a fascination with the power of human potential and what separates the best from the rest. And not sure of the exact moment, but a distinct memory was Mary Lou Retton vying for an Olympic gold individual medal in the 80s. And in true Olympic fashion, it was an epic battle with Catriona Szabo from Catriona Szabo. And it all came down to the last vault. And she scored a perfect 10. And so who does that? And so for me, it lit something, a fire in my belly that made me want to not only understand more about how we perform under pressure, but also represent my country. Fast forward, I ended up being able to play for Team Canada, 100 matches in the sport of field hockey, but it was my first match that led me on the path I am today. And, we're playing in Holland. I'm a young kid from Canada. This is a major sport here. And I felt that pressure to perform. It's my first opportunity to represent my country. And I needed to make sure that I did not mess up. Well, long story short, I got about 5 minutes on the field before I got yanked off. I trained my craft, I trained my body, but I had not trained my mind. And so as I was reflecting on that, I thought never again would I let my mind be a thief of my big moment. And that's what set me on the path that I am today, working with Olympians or executives or in the field in mental health, and really helping people to unleash their highest potential. And I'd say to our audience, we've all experienced anxiety and overwhelm, or felt uncertain when the pressure is on. And so I think making sure that we're embracing our mental health and taking care of that, it's not just for the Olympians and the elite. We all need to make sure that we're cultivating those skills and equipping us ourselves with the right tools so that we can be ready to withstand that pressure. And this is why it's so important to have places like the Distress Center. This has been a hard period for all of us. And you know, they've talked about the echo pandemic. Important to take care of our physical health, but equally important to take care of our mental health. So I'm really excited to be here today to have a conversation on how we can do that and underscore the importance of places like the Distress Center to act as a resource for those in need.
And Karen, as I said to you before we started, please lead to, I'm supposed to moderate this, but this is your bailiwick, so I want your advice and your ideas. Catriona, so you said, who does what Mary Lou Retton did? How about Catriona Le May Doan? How about Stephanie Labbé? We got two of them right here. Catriona, what's your story? Why are you here?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Well, good morning, everyone. You know, as Karen mentioned, having a resource like the Distress Center, but I think from my perspective, it's the fact that people might know you in a certain way. And there's a mask that we wear in everyday life. There's a mask that as athletes, and Steph knows this, that we wear, you know, on the field of play. So for myself, through my 17 years of speed skating, you know, as I started to do better, I started to transition to wear dark glasses. So if you see videos, it's not because I wanted to have this intimidating factor. It's actually because I didn't want people to see the fear in my eyes. And the reason for that was you feel pressure. And, you know, Ron, I mentioned earlier to you before we started the difference between pressure and stress. And as an athlete, you're stressed all the time, but it's what you do and that pressure of the moment. My event was 37 seconds. So to stand on that line and having fallen at my second Olympic Games, next Olympics, I win a gold and a bronze. And going into 2002, it's more pressure than I will ever feel in a moment again in my life. Nobody had defended at that point. So the pressure was excruciating. How did I do it? I don't know if I actually still understand how I did it. But you're in that moment, you were in control of what you can do. You try to control everything else. But I think since then, and you know, my mom was always the one who always said, never judge people by anything, never judge them by, you know, my mom had the same curtains in her house for 50 years. And she said, if people care about that walking in my house, and I don't want them to come in my house. But as an athlete, as an Olympic gold medalist, there's a judgment of who you should be, that you should be strong, that you shouldn't struggle, and you should have certain, you know, things go perfectly in your life. But people are human. And so I think I come back to the fact that there are times when we wear masks. And I'm actually going to say I got to the certain age where I take that mask off, and you can say you don't care what people think. You still do, but your skin becomes a lot thicker. And so I think, you know, the important thing for me is to be transparent and to be honest and to admit that life is hard. Whether you're on the field of play, whether you're an executive, whether you're, you know, day-to-day life is hard. And so there's stresses. Some are more since the pandemic. Some have eased. There are different pressures and, you know, different things that people deal with. And I remember a friend of mine, final thing, had said, you know, when you're going through your own tragedy, never compare tragedies. And that resonated with me, because what is going on in my life, which is super important and super tough, somebody might not understand, and that's okay. But it's that fact that, you know, for me, that is tough, and it's okay to be transparent. It's okay for me to not want to talk to people. It's okay for me to want to talk to people. So my reason for being here is to be transparent, to admit that you struggle, to admit that life is hard, and to admit that life is great at times as well.
What an incredible story, Catriona, about the glasses to protect your, Claire Carver-Dias, great synchronized swimmer for Canada. She recalls seeing herself on the pool deck at an Olympics and seeing the terror in her eyes. It always struck with her. But she said for her to get past it, she kind of thought if only the camera could zoom through the pupil and into my head and go the other way and see all the people behind me, my parents, my coaches, etc., that I kind of relied on to get through that terror. Just an amazing analogy there. Thank you for that. Stephanie, you too, I mentioned my anxiety attacks, severe panic attacks, all the way from when I was 17 through 35, hitting the stage for the NHL awards, just thinking I'm not going to be able to do this. But I was 35 when it kind of subsided for the reasons you mentioned, Kat. It was just, I finally, I think, matured enough that I was more concerned with others than myself. And you both retire mid-30s. That's kind of how it goes, right? You had to go through your entire competitive career like I did with this vulnerability. So Stephanie, why don't you lead from there, your path and your reason for here?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. I think for me, I grew up in being a goalkeeper. There's a ton of pressure. There's a lot of eyes on you. And I think for the first, I would almost say half of my career, I spent so much time and energy worrying about other people, worrying about what my coaches thought, analyzing my performances to the extreme, being a goalkeeper, and every time I let a goal in, being hard on myself, thinking about it, thinking I let my team down. And then, being with the national team, I spent the first 4.5 years as a backup goalkeeper. So the constant self-reflection, the draining of my self-confidence and myself. And then I think always kind of feeling like I was alone, like I was the only one, and thinking, I must be mentally weak. Why am I so worried about all these things? Why can't I just be happy and play? And it wasn't until, I look at what Karen was talking about, training everything. I worked so hard in the gym, I worked so hard on the field, and I just kept thinking why am I not getting more playing time? Why am I not being more successful? And it wasn't until I started to turn to the mental side of the game to really focus and hone in on that, to when my development and my growth and my success really started to take off in a new way. And I think I started to redefine what success was to me because I was a lot stronger mentally. And I think then towards the end of my career, I started to see other athletes speak out, which is what inspired me to start to talk about the things that I was going through, because I knew when other athletes were speaking out, how helpful that was to me to see that other people were going through, whether it was the similar thing or it was, one or two things from their story that I really connected with. It brought value and meaning to what I was going through. And I knew that if their story was helping me, I knew that my story could help somebody else as well. So the more I started to talk about it, I think the more in my journey, I started to become confident in what I was going through, that, this is normal. A lot of people do have these stresses and these worries and these hard times. And I think the more normal I felt, the easier it was for me to continue to go on. And I really started to look at the challenges and the adversities that I went through as things that were actually making me a much stronger individual. I really would go back to, those hard times and say, well, if I can get through that, I can get through anything. If I'm strong enough to believe in myself through those hard times, I can get through whatever is thrown at me in the future. And I think it was that consistency of building my confidence through hard times that I started to really see mental health not as a weakness, but as a strength for me.
One of the things you did, and Karen, I'm sure you have some thoughts on both those statements that we just heard, but I'll lead it to you this way. One of the things Stephanie did so well at Tokyo was body language. She conveyed to the opposition shooters, I ain't scared. In fact, I'm having the time of my life. And whether that was a set of sunglasses or not, it worked. All goalies do it. I could never do that, Karen. I've always struggled with striking a pose or, improving my, stance, my posture. I just can't fake it to make it. So go ahead about body language or whatever else occurred to you when you heard Catriona and Stephanie there.
Yeah, two things really stood out to me as they're both speaking, and something we've seen over and over again is, number one, I'll use the word stoicism. I need to injure without issue or complaint. And that's a part of the high performance athletic culture. I can't show authentically what I'm feeling. And I think that's what's so great with what we're seeing now. A lot of the times we'd see athletes come forward post-career. We're seeing them come forward during their career and just saying, this is part of it. And we need to equip ourselves with tools. We need the outside world to understand that we are not immune from these issues, and we need support in order to cope with them. So it's that whole idea of a mental health issue is not a weakness. It's just part of where we're going here. So I think that's one thing. The stigma piece, acknowledging it, learning more about mental health, talking more about it, and being kind and compassionate, right? That's how we're getting through this. But now we need to act. And that's the other thing that I took from what both Steph and Catriona said. They had strategies. So whether it was the sunglasses, whether it was equipping with some mental tools, they both prepared themselves. They made themselves ready for what they were going to endure. And I think our audience, it doesn't have to be on the Olympic stage. We face pressure and demands all the time. So I guess I would challenge our audience. What are you doing to build that mental muscle? In addition, are you aware of the resources such as Distress Center? And you don't have to be stoic and do it alone.
That's good. So you'll have to teach us, Dr. MacNeill, about something, because I love it. You said Catriona. That's right. we always take the shortcut on you, Catriona. But anyway, so you, Catriona, when you were doing your role, and as you said, what a time to be the chef de mission. Your son was devastated. You were going to be the chef de mission for Connor McDavid and Sidney Crosby, and boom, the NHL can't go because of COVID-19. But what did you do when you met this skater who was going to Europe for training en route to the Olympic Games in Beijing, where you would be the chef de mission, and you just had a chat about both injury and starts? The biggest, for Jeremy Weatherspoon, catches a toe on the very moment, and that's that. Every skater realizes that fear. So what did you say to that person, and how did you equip Olympians for their challenge?
Oh, how did I equip them? Well, I mean, taking on a role of chef de mission was, ultimately it was actually my dream. And quick little story, I'd actually told myself I'd been to 4 games as an athlete, 5 as media. This was my second as mission team. And I told myself I would never get the Olympic rings until I was chef de mission. It was just my own thing. That's how much it meant to me. Kind of came full circle. So, for me to take on that role, tough. You take a month off work. It's a volunteer role. You taking it on during the pandemic in a controversial country such as China. But for me, it was the role of exactly what you said, Ron. When there are athletes going there who want to be their very best, they want to be the best. Let's not deny it. They want to stand on the podium, but at the end of the day, all they can control is to be their very best. So what I wanted was to be a tiny little part of that journey, so that somebody could have that experience, walk away saying, I was as good as I could be on that very day. And again, I'm talking about the Olympics, but this is exactly the same as every single day. The fact that at the end of the day, if we can say, this part of what I did today was the best that I could be. And sometimes that's a struggle. But with that athlete, it was about breaking it down. And that's what sometimes I feel that we do. As an athlete, I used to look at, I want this result. I want this time. But then you break it down into, how do I get there? And I broke it down into literally 100 meters. And I had 5 key words. I used to draw my races out because I actually couldn't visualize like the visualizing part. I'm visual with writing. So I actually drew my race out on a piece of paper every single night. I have thousands of ovals with arrows on them and the same 5 words. Nothing ever changed. But it's breaking down the stages. And I think, in anything in life, that's where we get overwhelmed, is because we think on everything. And I do it. I'm busy. I get overwhelmed. I get bombarded in my own brain, and I need to break it down. But that's what I did with the athlete. Let's talk about what you can control. Let's talk about that start. And she was dealing with an injury, and just those little basic things. We need to, you come back to that KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And we complicate everything in our lives. And all I want to reiterate is, life is complicated, life is difficult, but sometimes it's those simple things that save us. For me, it's literally, sometimes just going outside, sitting for 5 minutes, reading a book, whatever it might be. It's the simple things. And that's, to me, what I tried to portray to the athletes in that role as chef.
What were the 5 words?
Well, it literally had an arrow. So power was the first one because I needed to be powerful. Low around the first corner, aggressive down the back stretch because I had to go. I was scared of that second corner. Low. And then it was patience, because when you see that finish line and you're exhausted, and yes, it's only 37 seconds, and your technique goes out the window, then you're in trouble. So when I got overwhelmed, I thought of the piece of paper and those words, because you stand on that line and you're standing super vulnerable in a tight spandex suit with millions or billions of people watching you, and you were by yourself. I thought back to those words. It was a constant battle. Like I still feel sometimes I'm dealing with that pressure because it was such a constant battle back and forth. It was never easy.
No, that's so beautiful. Just Sheldon Kennedy, when he did Battle of the Blades, he would trace out every step on a piece of paper, and he had to do it that way too. He couldn't visualize it he had to write it. So Stephanie, why don't you just show us the words behind you? It's a very funny little, I'm sure you have a more important mental trigger that you used when you were on the goal line, but yeah, show the viewer that, explain that, and then tell us about what words you used to get through things.
Yeah, this is just like a really simple way of, yesterday I wanted tacos, now I'm eating tacos, follow your dreams. I think, yeah, I really love what Catriona, and for me, like what I took out of that was just like the simplicity and to the moment. And, there's, for me, I think as an athlete, like stepping over the white line, I was always able to just like channel a different version of myself. Like every time I stepped on the field, that was where I felt the most safe, the most confident, like the best version of myself. And I think for me, being able to thrive in like high pressure situations was because every single day I stepped on the field, I would give it my all. I would train to my absolute maximum. I would make sure I left everything out on the field. And that way, when the name and the high demands were there, I just relied on the facts of what I've been doing. I knew that I wasn't going to step out and do anything, out of my skin, different than what I've done before. And it was just always relying on what I had inside, relying on what I've built and what I've trained towards. And I think just having that confidence and that trust in myself that whatever I need, I have it inside of me. I don't have to search elsewhere for it. I don't have to, look elsewhere, ask other people for things. Like I know that I have it inside of me. And then I think with that, a big thing for me was like, at the same time, like understanding that it's okay to lean on people. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to work with a psychologist or to ask your friends for things, to vent to somebody without needing something back. And the more that I was able to really do that, to lean on other people for support, I think the more that I was able to come back to that strong, confident person that I am, because I was able to either get emotions out or just get a little bit of an unbiased opinion on something. And sometimes we need that. Sometimes it's just getting something out and you just need somebody to listen. And sometimes, you need advice on something and to ask for that and to ask for help. I think that's like one of the strongest things you can do to if you are struggling, but to also lean on somebody else and ask them, because having that strong support system for me was one of the things that got me through some of the hardest times.
You can all chime in on this, but one of the roadblocks, like when I worked with the Ontario Provincial Police, they had a series of suicides, mental health issues that resulted in suicide. And there was always this concern that if we speak about it, it will manifest, that somehow it's the cause when you start to discuss mental health or suicide. And it's not the case. But Dr. MacNeill, you would know that's one of the things we have to, it's a different version of a stigma.
That's right. And I think, in fact, it's actually the opposite. It's the isolation and being alone that's the cause. And we really need to understand when we look at suicide or suicide ideations, it's not that the person actually wants to die. It's that their pain is so intolerable, they don't see another way. So having a distress center where I can call someone and I can get connected and know this is normal. It's okay to feel these really overwhelming feelings, and there is a way to manage that. And so I think as we're working through these things, these conversations, and I just appreciate how these two exceptional athletes are talking about their vulnerabilities. I also like the proactive approach that they're talking about in terms of it's not something I need to go alone, but it's something that I need to navigate, which is really interesting.
Well, Catriona, you couldn't really turn to anybody. Rosie McLennan has defended a gold medal. Alex Bilodeau has since defended a gold medal, but you were the first to do that. It just was not done. And a dear friend of ours, Adam Van Couverden here, he was thought to be bulletproof when he carried the flag into the Beijing Olympic Games in 2008, and it just didn't work. So how did you do it? How did you find, because you said it was disappointing to fall in Lillehammer, but it was a lot harder to win and then try to defend. Go on about that.
I mean, Kieran mentioned earlier about how she hadn't trained mentally, and I had, but how did I do it? I in certain ways I don't know. I mean, when I think back to it, when I watch my race, I know the result, but I get stressed. And the fact is I was 31 years old, and I had trained for those 37 seconds in every single way. And what Karen was just talking about, we had the years having two teenage kids, and especially one being a boy, where, we're talking about vulnerability, but I don't think we've, in our community and in our society, when we haven't allowed teenagers, and maybe this is fair or not, but especially boys, to be vulnerable. That to me is that scares me, because I can now admit that. Maybe I didn't admit it as much when I was an athlete. And, there are certain things that now I talk about. I talk about the fear as an athlete of going into the cafeteria, because even though I'd been there before, it stressed me out to no end to walk in and go, do I know anybody? I loved COVID at the Olympic Games because we were in our own little bubble. I loved walking into the cafeteria because I'm at 51 years old. I'm like, I don't have to stress if I know anybody because I sit in my own little cubicle. People think that that's a silly little thing. It gave me so much peace. But I'm 51 years old. So when I look at my teenage kids, that's what stresses me, is that vulnerability. I don't know if we sort of talk about that age of vulnerability enough, which is when, if we can normalize that vulnerability at that age, by the time, we get to these performances of sport or business or whatever it might be, we've accepted that and we're more used to maybe talking about it or dealing with it. And again, I don't know if that's fair, but I've witnessed it from a mom's side. And there's nothing tougher. Steph, I can't imagine parents, I know for my mom, for Olympic Games, she's like, thank goodness that you're done with that. But, to see a child, like I watched my son on the ice and my daughter on the ice for a ringette, but a goalie parent, oh my goodness. So, but as a parent, I think that's, it's just a different situation.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Sorry, Ron.
No, that's great. And I do agree about men. I think, that there was a time during the Enlightenment when men were, admired because they were thoughtful. They sat in their room and they wrote and they taught. And then the Industrial Revolution changed everything. Men had to be big, strong, and the breadwinner. And that just took us away from using our head in the right way. Now, having said that, Hamlet perished of thinking too well. So here's, Steffi, you can talk about your folks and family watching you play net. It's not easy. This is Sammy Jo Small, Olympic champion in the third string role for the 2002 games. And that whole thing about not getting to play was devastating to her in Salt Lake City. And she talks about going to the cafeteria. She wandered around in the night aimlessly, comes back to the cafeteria. It's full of athletes done their competitions. Some are returning from late night parties, celebrating successes, while others lurk in the corners, staring into midair, wishing their Olympics had gone differently. I grab a smoothie and sit down. I find solace seeing other athletes' dejection. Others look the same way I feel. I sit in silence for a long time. Then she goes back to the room. Her roommate is Jennifer Botterill. She tucks herself into bed, cries facing the wall, trying not to bring Jen down before Jen did win the gold medal. So, yeah, parents of a goalie. Stephanie, go ahead.
I'll have to give a shout out. I think my mom's actually listening in on the call now, so gotta give a shout out to my mom. Yeah, I mean, my parents, like, bless their souls. I feel so bad because every time I go into any type of a major competition, it's like I disappear. I don't really connect with them as much when I'm in there because it's so hard for me to like get on my phone in between things. I just feel like I have to, be totally present and keep all the energy for what I can. But my mom, no matter where I am in the world, no matter what the time change is, she figures it out and she always sends me a happy game day message. So I always wake up to that no matter what it is. So whether she's sending it like late at night, knowing that I'm getting it when I wake up, whatever it is, she always sends me that. And that was always like a bright spot of my game days, is being able to wake up to that message from her. But yeah, it's funny. I have like a very similar thinking about the cafeteria. That was something that was a big part of my journey as well in Tokyo. So leading into Tokyo, I had quite a interesting experience in terms of, I think just like my own journey of what role I was going to be playing leading into that tournament. 6 months before Tokyo started, I was kind of ripped out of the starting role there, somebody else, and then there was an me back into the mix. I played, every single game leading into the Olympics, but in the final camp right before we went, I was told, we haven't made our decision of who the starter is going to be. We still don't know if it's going to be you. And that took me for, a whole loop with just like 3 weeks to go before we went to Tokyo and played our first game. And, all of the internal turmoil of the self-doubt, the am I good enough? Have I proved enough? Have I shown enough of what I can do? All of those self-doubt thoughts were coming into play. But I chose to continue to just focus on myself, focus on proving and doing what I can do, doing everything that's in my control. I can't control other things. I can't control other players. I can't control what the coaches think. All I can control is, what I give and what I leave out on the pitch and my work ethic. And so, I chose to continue to control that. And, 3 days before our first game, I was then told that I would be the starter. And then in the first game, I get a pretty brutal injury where I have to end up subbing myself out of that game, not really knowing if that was going to be the end of my competition. And, the only emotions I could think at that time was I've just gone through so much like self reflection, so much self-worth issues, some confidence things, was I even going to get the spot? I finally earned it and now I'm injured. Am I going to be out the rest of the tournament? Like so many emotions going through my mind, and pile that on top of, the past 2 years leading into that Olympics, myself, as well as everybody around the world, like the pandemic hit us hard. There's a lot of stress, anxiety going. You picture like a bucket of water, my bucket was right at the top. The water was almost overflowing, but it wasn't yet. So I was carrying this around, not even knowing that I had this full bucket. And then this injury was like, it added that last bit of water on, and it started to kind of spill over. And that was kind of like, the overflow of it for me. And I missed the second game because I was in and out of the hospital getting a lot of tests done for the injury. But finally being able to get back to playing again. And then, in the quarterfinal, we played Brazil and we won penalty shootouts, very dramatic, and they saved the last 2 shots. And I had this like massive adrenaline rush after the game. Like it was so exciting, being able to be that strong, confident goalkeeper that the team needed, which is something that, I had been really working on for the past couple of years to make sure that like when that time came and the team needed me, I wanted to be that goalkeeper that was going to step up. So being able to do that, it brought this like huge adrenaline rush. And then from that quarterfinal on, like I was carrying that adrenaline rush and I never really came down from that high. So everything I was carrying, like that anxiety, I was at my full capacity. So anything that brought any type of stimulation, like threw me over the top. And so that was my experience with the cafeteria, was the thought of going into the cafeteria, the thought of seeing of all the noise, all the lights, the decisions of like what I want to eat, all of these things were just like throwing me off. And so I have like a very similar experience of, I don't want to go into that cafeteria. I can't even think about stepping into that. And that was like where I really had to lean and lean on, you know, my roommate to help me out, to get me through those moments, to keep me like, okay, we're just going to go corner. We're going to keep it a nice and quiet meal. But yeah, it was so interesting that cafeteria story, that gives me like such immediate throwback to my experience as well.
Who was your roommate?
Quinn was my roommate at the time.
Fantastic. Yeah. Kudos, Quinn. So, yeah, we only have about 5 minutes. So, Dr. MacNeill, in summary, I think one of the great, and I know there's doctor-client confidentiality involved here, but certainly you and Stephanie know one another. And when I hear Stephanie speak to CBC so eloquently in her retirement essay about maintaining her curiosity, maintaining her connection as kind of the savior to seeing herself through things, that's you. So what does that mean?
Yeah. And I think, you know, as I, you know, just in summary of what I'm hearing here, and really, how do we navigate this pressure? What is pressure? It's when we really, really want to produce a certain result and there's no certainty of that outcome. And so I think the trick to manage uncertainty is clarity. Both Catriona and Steph talked about, who am I at my best? What am I hungry for? Why am I here? What am I doing? And they also talked about resourcing themselves. How do what support do I need? I can be vulnerable, and it's okay to not be okay. But I got this little whisper of, yes, I can, even though navigating all those things. So I think when we look at connection, so important. And once again, let's underscore the Distress Center and the role they play for the community, whether it's on this call or the community at large. And I think the important to take proactive measures to protect and promote your mental health, and also get the support when needed.
Anywhere you want to go, Catriona, but I think I love the idea you did your first ever job interview at the age of 45. So after a very distinguished career, you managed to apply and become the CEO and president of Sport Calgary. So whatever you'd like to say to close.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just sort of going on what Karen said is understanding what gives you energy. And that's different than somebody else. You know, I've had to, you know, at 45 say, okay, you know, I'm done with media. I want sort of a quote unquote normal job, but with my sport career, I didn't have a normal path. I don't have a university degree. I never finished that. And medals look nice, but you need to be able to put that to actual work. And, you know, I've worked hard, and hard work has never scared me. But, you know, I think it's the fact of understanding what gives you energy. And, you know, we bring up COVID briefly. You know, I'm the person that my kids and I actually got energy during COVID, because the pressure of, I love people, but sometimes the pressure of being out and about and at events, that was taken away. And so we actually got to just be at home. And, you know, it's difficult. My kids are in a split family, so going back and forth. And so, you know, we kind of giggle that last Christmas when we were quarantined for 10 days, it was so lovely because we were at home, you know, the three of us and our two dogs. And, you know, and that's okay. But now that, you know, we're coming out of these restrictions, understanding what gives me energy. And that's for me, sometimes just taking the time by myself, just taking a day. In the summer, we took a holiday because we had to get away. I knew I was on the verge of breaking down. It's okay to actually acknowledge that.
That's regulating. It's so important. It's unbelievable. Stephanie, last word to you.
Yeah, I think I would just like be compassionate, be kind to one another. You know, just what we see on the outside isn't always the full story. You know, I go back to my Olympic experience as this image of me, you know, smiling and being the strong, confident person on the goal line during those penalty shots, which you know, every time I step over that white line, I am my most confident, proud self there. But it was, you know, there was a lot of challenges that were going on behind the scenes once I stepped off the field and that. So I think it's, you know, just because we see people high functioning and looking like they're, you know, in this great space, it doesn't mean that they're not struggling. So be kind to one another, check in on each other, check in on your friends and family. just know that everybody has a story, and anybody could be struggling. So just be kind, be compassionate.
So great. Thank you. I'll end with a golf story. Brooke Henderson won at Evian her second major on July the 24th. She's won 12 times. Her sister has been on the bag caddying for her each and every time except for one. And Brittany's incredible with the right words at the right time whenever Brooke is in trouble. It's, hit fairways, hit greens, whatever it takes. She'll always find a way to calm her sister down and help her win. My greatest caddy story is there was a guy named Harry Varden. He won the British Open 6 times. He came to North America 3 times. First time he won the U.S. Open. The other 2 times he was second. Incredible golfer. Gave us the overlapping grip, the Varden grip. He made it popular. He was trying to qualify for the cut at Prestwick, and he was really struggling. And he had 100 yards. He had to make a birdie. And he said to his caddy, he says, I've had this bloody shot all day, 100 yards. I've got to get it up and down. I've tried my niblick, which is a 9-iron. I've tried my pitching niblick, which is an 8-iron. I've tried my jigger, which is a lofted wedge, and none of these seems to work. What do I take now? And the caddy says, well, might I suggest the 4 p.m. train? And it was a moment of levity that kind of broke the tension that Harry was experiencing. And certainly he made a great shot, made the cut, and won another claret jug. So yeah, it's not easy to be funny, as I have discovered, but it's sometimes what we need. And that's why I love your tacos back there, Stephanie. And Catriona always was great at Canada Games. And Dr. MacNeill, continued success. You wanted to be a sportscaster. I'm glad that you're taking that talent to what it is that you do. Yeah. Lauren, I send it back to you and to Robin to close. Thank you all.
Well, thank you so much for that moment of levity. We all need that smile and those happy times too. And I want to just say thank you to all of our panelists today, Ron, Dr. MacNeill, Stephanie, Catriona. You guys all got so incredibly raw and personal with us. Every single one of us gets overwhelmed. We all have our personal struggles. And I feel like every single one of us also has our cafeteria moments, as you mentioned during that talk. So thanks for sharing those moments with us, but also how you worked through them, pushed forward, and really, really triumphed. So thank you all for this candid conversation this morning. Our next guest is Robin Romano, Executive Director for the Distress Center. Robin, good morning.
Good morning, Lauren. And good morning, everyone. How amazing was that? I'm like, how do I speak? How do I even follow up after that? Ron, Catriona, Karen, Stephanie, that was absolutely amazing. And what an inspiring way to start the morning. I think talking to a few of our staff here who have been listening in, we've all been kind of jotting down notes of things that we can take into our own practice out of today. Again, just want to say a huge thank you, Lauren, for hosting and emceeing and guiding us through the morning. Your help and support each year with this event helps us go off without a hitch. Also want to say a huge thank you to the planning team. An event like this takes months, hours, days to get organized. And so hopefully everyone's had a great morning this morning, kicking off the day properly with some motivation as we get out there. So thank you again to our planning team. I hope everyone had a chance this morning to jump into those coffee corners. I want to say a huge thank you to our volunteers. So if you were in a coffee corner this morning, you actually got to spend time with our volunteers who, when they're not online with you, are actually here in our contact center supporting Calgarians. I want to say a huge thank you to our board of directors and staff who continue to offer their support day in and day out. And of course, to our amazing sponsors. And Ian, you did such a great job in your video this morning. We were talking about that as well. Excited to get to spend a little bit more time with you. Just want to wrap up and sharing a little bit about what we do here at Distress Center and ways that you can get involved and support the work that we do. Distress Center Calgary does critical work in our community. We are an $8.3 million organization that thoughtfully and intentionally is continuing to grow in how we support and serve our community. And we can't do this important work without each and every one of you. And there's a number of ways that you can support Distress Center. First, your time. Consider volunteering. Consider coming down, hanging out, spending some time with us in the contact center here. Also, your talent and your network. There's nothing better for our organization than your endorsement. Please follow us on social media, subscribe to our newsletter, attend events like these, and come be part of the story. And lastly, your treasure. Investing in our work is investing in our city. It is investing in system change and supporting those in crisis. It's caring that there will always be someone at the end of the line, the chat, or the text that starts with Distress Center. How can I help you? Thank you so much again, everyone, for attending London Ear this morning and for your ongoing support and contribution to Distress Center. Back over to you, Lauren.
Thank you, Robin. And I just want to take a moment to say a big thank you to you and your team. You guys are all the reason that we're here this morning. The vital work that you do, you're there for people when they need it the most, when they need that ear to listen and to offer up next steps and help throughout the way. So thank you so much for this event and for the tireless work that you and your volunteers and your team do every single day. And we also want to thank everyone at home here joining us virtually for this year's event for the Distress Center this morning. Robin did mention that those coffee corners are still open. You can get up close and personal, continue that conversation with the volunteers at the event platform. Take a moment to chat a bit further. We just heard some incredibly powerful conversations and may want to talk a bit more about them. Again, we do want to thank all of our sponsors, Viewpoint Foundation, Altitude Communications, GLN, Land Solutions Corp, Daytona Homes, Global Calgary, 770, and Event Fluid Event Management. And a big thank you once again to our esteemed star-studded panel for really opening up and getting that conversation about mental health going. Thank you so much and have a great morning, everyone. Appreciate you joining us.